Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Ruther from the Maneuver Capabilities and Integration Directorate down here at Fort Benning, Georgia. We generate requirements for the material development within the maneuver and ground domain portfolio. We're working hard to bring platform electrification to the force. I'd like to welcome you to today's Electrification Industry Day. We are excited about both of our initiatives, both tactical and combat electrification and the electric light reconnaissance vehicle. We plan to discuss these in depth today and are excited for the large turnout for this event. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's event is threefold. First is to connect. We can't do this alone. We know that your companies are aggressively pursuing electric capabilities, whether it's through propulsion, battery density, exportable power, or some other aspect of electrification, and we need your help. Our goal is to deliver top-tier electrified platforms to our customers, more specifically, the soldiers that make our Army. You, your companies, are the experts in this field, and we want to develop a strong partnership in achieving our desired material solutions. Second, it's to communicate. We see electrification from the view of the ground domain. We see vehicle platform as a power source for our formations. We want to make sure when we leave this event today that we clearly articulated the importance of electrification of our organization, how electrification fits our formations, and for you to understand our commitment to move forward with our requirements. Third is to inform. We intend to inform you of our electrification desirements that we seek in terms of electrified vehicle platforms and capabilities within those platforms. We want you to have a basic understanding of how our desirements fit into the warfighter's need and understand where we can partner, making our requirements reality. At the bottom of your screen, bottom right, you're going to see a place where you can ask questions, and we'll answer those questions at the end of this briefing here. Next slide, please. Our agenda today will follow the schedule you see here, and it'll last about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. First, we'll open up with messages from Mr. Sando, the MC Director. We'll then turn it over to Dr. James Mancilis, who authored the Futures and Concept Electrification White Paper. Following that, we'll move into tactical and combat vehicle electrification requirements discussion. Then myself and Steve Herrick will go through the electric light reconnaissance vehicle, or OLRV. After that, we'll open it up to questions. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to a video message from our MC Director, Mr. Don Sando.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Sando, Director of the Maneuver Capabilities and Integration Directorate here at Fort Benning, Georgia. Welcome to the Army Futures Command Industry Day for Combat Vehicle Electrification. The leaders and soldiers here at the Maneuver Center of Excellence are excited about the future of vehicle electrification and greatly appreciate your participation and collaboration in our efforts to improve the capability of our soldiers. Electrification and electric propulsion are essential aspects in maintaining a competitive advantage against our enemies on future battlefields. This is a really important endeavor for us, and we need your help. Some of you may recall my comments from 3 years ago at the annual meeting of the Association of the United States Army. I said then that in 10 years, some of our brigade combat teams will be all electric, and that's a generational change. Well, we have 7 years remaining, and we need industry's help. We're at the point now where technology is available to militarize electric vehicles and provide the capabilities that our soldiers need. So what's in it for us? Improved mobility, increased availability of electric power, and most importantly, a reduced sustainment burden for our combat formations. Our goal is to increase system capability relative to weight and increase unit effectiveness relative to size. So what's in it for you? An opportunity to serve our soldiers, America's sons and daughters who volunteer to serve us all. Again, welcome to our Industry Day, and thank you for your commitment to helping our soldiers. Thank you for your curiosity about how best to help us, and thank you for your creativity in delivering world-class solutions.
At this moment, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. James Mancilis from the Futures Integration Directorate at the Army Futures Command Futures and Concept Center. Dr. Mancilis, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. James Mancias, Senior Science Advisor to the U.S. Army Futures Command Futures and Concept Center. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Today we're here discussing vehicle electrification. And I think my role here is to sort of kick off and answer the question why. A while back, General Wesley, the former director of Futures and Concept Center, asked us to write a paper to get after and inspire the Army to sort of pursue electrification. And one of the principal roles of that was to answer the question why now, and how do we get after it? And so I kind of want to have that discussion just really quickly. But before we do, let's sort of take a historical perspective of vehicles in the Army. It's been about 100 years since the Army started using mechanized vehicles. In 1819, the Army introduced its first purpose-built automated vehicle, or a mechanized vehicle, the Liberty truck. Since then, the Army has pursued vehicles, very iconic vehicles, such as the Jeep, the Humvee, Sherman tank, and say the M1 Abrams tank and the Bradley. These vehicle platforms were developed at a time where they sort of fit the role. The Jeep, sort of brought in during World War II, continued its operation through the Korean conflict, through Vietnam, and then sort of ended up transitioning out when it was replaced by the Humvee in the 1980s. And so for almost 40 years, that vehicle filled a niche, a role. And the reason why it did was because as that vehicle stayed in operation, it went through iterations. That platform, that frame, that vehicle sort of kept being upgraded and modernized through that period. It fit a role with an operational concept. And then in the 1980s, similar to other vehicles, the concept of the Army changed. We kind of faced operational concept, the Humvee, that changed the role of that vehicle. We kind of picked that role and moved forward. Here we are, 40 years later, and looking at, again, what is the role of the vehicle in the Army? It's really Humvee, like I said, 1980, and so for 40 years, we've been modernizing it, it's gone through iteration after iteration. It kind of no longer fits the role that the Army has changed. It's changed how it's going to fight. It's changed its operational concept. We've redefined our enemies and or our adversaries, and we've redefined where we're going to fight. And so we're looking for a vehicle that fills that role. It fits it within our operational concept, and it meets operational capabilities in locations that we intend to fight. And so it's a risk-informed sort of vehicle. That's really why we're here. When we look at vehicle electrification, what we're really looking at is a transformation of the vehicles that we had and what role they filled and what vehicles need to fill today. So since 1980, the Army has dramatically changed its, or I should say the vehicle itself has dramatically changed, or at least its role has dramatically changed. In the 1980s and the 1940s, those two iterations before it, the vehicle was predominantly a means to move soldiers from one location to another, or move equipment from one location to another. Since the 1980s and perhaps around the 1990s timeframe, the Army recognized that vehicles was no longer just a method of transport. It was a node for communications. It was a sensor platform. It powered weapon systems, and it needed to sort of fill a different role. It was used differently, and this sort of went through that evolution of network-centric warfare, air-land domain battle. And sort of now, as we move into multi-domain operations, the role of the vehicle has changed. And so in previous years, and so in the 90s, the Army recognized that the role of the vehicle was changing. They invested significantly in sort of getting after that need. There was a Future Combat Systems. This was a significant investment by the U.S. Army, about $19 billion to develop that next iteration of vehicle, one that could operate in a networked environment, one that could operate in teamed manned and unmanned vehicle systems, one that could really operate in the modern battlefield. Unfortunately, at that time, it was the technology wasn't there. and they spent $19 billion, and not one vehicle was delivered to the Army that met an Army operational need. Some of the challenge that really existed at the time was the Army had not yet solidified a new operational concept. It didn't really recognize what it, or didn't really articulate what it needed in the next battlefield, nor did it really have a technological readiness. And so as we're looking to replace vehicles and get after the next iteration, we've kind of got to ask ourselves, why are we here then? And the reason why we're here is because I think electrified vehicles offer an opportunity to meet those capabilities and those needs. The platforms that we're using today, the Abrams tank, the Humvee, and a multitude of other platforms have sort of lived past their usability, or they're approaching the end of their life. The chassis, the frame itself, can no longer support the operational needs of a future battlefield. We need a system that can carry, or I should say, power sensors, power computational edge computing, remain engaged in a battlefield network, and then also export power to both power defensive and offensive weapons for the vehicle, as well as a formation power grid. And so the chassis that exists today, or the frame platforms that exist today, don't really meet the operational requirements of the future battlefield. And I think that's why we're here. Hold on here. So to that end, why are we doing this now? And I think you're representative of why we're doing this now. The Army has recognized that the electrification of the industry, automotive industry, has really moved forward over the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, we've seen that the cost of a battery is reduced by about an order of magnitude. So a battery today is about 1/10 the cost of a battery 10 years ago, while its power density is increased by an order or a factor of 3. What we see are clear trends in capabilities or future capabilities that are deliverable by electrified vehicles that weren't there 10 years ago. And if likewise, what we also recognize are there are advantages to electrified vehicles. Electrified vehicles are simpler. They have fewer moving parts. And so we see an advantage in operational reliability. We see increases in performance, the capabilities to sprint, operate in stealth mode. We have reduced signatures of thermal and acoustic signatures. And then also improved endurance. The ability to harvest power from multitude of sources rather than just rely on one logistics chain that provides liquid fuels to power internal combustion engines is one of the real advantages in the future operational domain and the operational concepts that the Army are pursuing. And so these are really significant advantages for the vehicle electrification. And so why now? Again, as I've said before, the maturity of the technology is there and the trends are in the right direction. We see it. They're becoming electrified vehicles are becoming cost competitive. And likewise, the entire automotive industry in the United States, in China, across the globe have begun to transform. The Army has to look at the sustainment of its vehicles as it moves forward. And what we're seeing is that as the automotive industry moves forward, the legacy systems that the Army operates now, the diesel engines, the transmissions, sort of the powertrain systems that the Army uses will become legacy systems. And if the Army doesn't transition to systems that are sort of employed through the sort of commercial enterprise, such as yourselves provide, we're not going to be able to afford sustain our vehicles. And so what the Army is trying to do is also get ahead of those requirements, to look ahead and see that as the world transitions, as the industry transitions to electrified vehicles, so must the Army. And so how are we going to do that? Well, the Army is going to do that in a couple different ways. And I know there are a lot of people who are going to discuss this later on after me. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a phased approach. We're going to look at vehicles, and we're going to start sort of in light vehicles and then sort of incorporate through experimentation. And we're going to sort of evaluate systems designs, the kind of infrastructures that we need, the training and sustainment tails that are incurred through that, and all the other externalities that we haven't yet considered for electrified vehicles, and sort of play with those. I hate to say play with those, but explore those as we begin to slowly adopt more and more electrification throughout the Army. And that means really is a progression from light vehicles, which are probably a little bit easier to attack from an electrified point of view, and then transition to heavier and heavier vehicles as the technology improves. So I think that's about all I have to say today. I think this concludes my discussion.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Mancilis. I know that your paper has helped us inform both of our requirements, and it's really given us a foundation as we march towards electrification within the Army. At this point, I want to take a minute to set where we're at in terms of requirements process. So a few months ago, our directorate went to General Murray with two proposed requirements. The first was a light reconnaissance vehicle, and the other tactical and combat vehicle electrification. As a result of our engagement with General Murray, he approved continued work on both efforts and directed us down the path of initial capabilities document for TAC-V and an abbreviated capabilities development document and rapid prototyping for ELRV. I will get into more specifics on both of those documents here in a little bit, but both documents are now complete in staffing. We've pursued an aggressive schedule, and we intend to have these documents approved within a matter of months after the new year. Bottom line is, we're moving forward with development of the Army's first electric vehicle, as well as we're moving forward with electrification of the Army's tactical and combat vehicle fleet. Next slide, please. Before we get into the desirements that we seek for TAC-V, I wanted to quickly lay out the benefits of electrification under this requirement, and then give you an understanding on how we plan to inform these requirements. Next slide, please. As we all know, electrification is a very complex subject that is continuously evolving like many tech-heavy sectors. This is why, when we start our journey, we set out to establish a community of interest where we could leverage the expertise within the Army and then the government to inform our requirements. This slide depicts that community of interest. All of these organizations you see have initiatives, projects, or programs involved in electrification technologies. We use many of these document programs, projects, as well as stakeholder knowledge to ensure that we have the requirements right. Up in the top right corner of this slide, you'll see industry. We hands down need your help as you're essential to this community. Bottom line, we're confident in our ability based on the expertise we have leveraged and the strength and professionalism of our team. Finally, at the bottom of the slide, you'll notice that TAC-V will serve as a foundational requirement for Army electrification. As we move forward, we'll continue to refine specific vehicle sets and capabilities as developed. Next slide, please. As you can see, this slide depicts the benefits of electrification. Under TAC-V, we are highly interested in high voltage architecture and hybrid and all-electric powertrains. We don't expect to see all these benefits initially, but as technology becomes available, the ability to achieve these along with unknown benefits will grow substantially. This is why it is essential that when we develop capabilities, we do it in a manner that enables acceptance of future technologies and future power demands. The Army cannot trade in its vehicles every 6 to 8 years, and just like we can in the civilian market. We procure large amounts of vehicles over an extended life cycle. We're talking up to 30 years plus per vehicle set. This is why it's essential to incorporate modularity and adequate size, weight, and power characteristics in the new systems. This supports the ability to incorporate new and emerging technologies, more specifically power storage capabilities. Platform electrification is important to the Army in obtaining a competitive advantage against our adversaries, and recently it's gained congressional and senior leader interest. It will advance the effectiveness of maneuver support, the Army's warfighting concept, multi-domain operations. The goal is to enable the force to conduct sustained operations for extended durations, providing that competitive advantage over our adversaries. The benefits of platform electrification positively impact all levels of combat. tactical, operational, strategic. However, we're more interested in the operational and tactical benefits. From a tactical perspective, electrification can increase the time units conduct silent watch, which essentially is the ability to overwatch, a certain area of the enemy, specifically off battery power, without triggering the internal combustion engine. It facilitates on-demand silent mobility, which will allow us to move undetected. Electrification can also reduce the thermal signature a vehicle produces. When we talk ELRV, imagine a scout vehicle that can't be heard or detected through thermal optics. We believe these aspects of electrification will lead to increased lethality and survivability during movement and maneuver. Electrification provides high torque through electric motors that can significantly increase mobility within our fleet. It also offers the potential to provide the required power for high demand energy systems to include weapon systems, protection systems, C5 ISR, and other communications equipment. It enables the concept we're calling formation power, or the ability to recharge all organic and habitually attached equipment for each crew member through the platform itself. Platform electrification enables integration of innovative power management techniques, or smart power, by reducing power demand through application management based on system need. Sharing power through microgridding for operational centers, external equipment, and other vehicles will become a reality as we electrify our fleet. From an operational perspective, electrification drives demand reduction of liquid fuel. It will increase reliability. It will also increase maintainability, and most importantly, it will enable commanders to better control tempo through reduced logistical tails. Like mentioned, platform electrification, whether hybrid, electric, or all electric, can significantly reduce liquid fuel consumption, which with achievable technologies, we believe that can be up to 45% from what our current fleet expends. Hybrid engines and all electric motors have less components and parts, simplifying maintenance and reducing the mean time to repair while increasing reliability. Finally, like I mentioned earlier, electrification increases duration, enabling the force to better execute multi-domain operations. These tactical and operational benefits are a huge increase in our capabilities from what we have in the current force. Next slide, please. TAC-V is an overarching requirement that sets the foundation for Army electrification. TAC-V will serve as a base document or foundation for future new starts and modifications of existing vehicle fleets. Other requirements documents will be derivative from tactical and combat vehicle electrification requirement. The first requirement is the electric light reconnaissance vehicle. After approval of the TAC-V requirement, we'll set our sights on the next requirement born from the TAC-V umbrella. The tactical and combat vehicle electrifications requirement will follow an incremental approach that will both assist and guide capability developers in electrification of the Army's tactical and combat fleet. Requirements for new starts and modifications of existing systems will be expedited by tracing back to the TAC-V requirement. The requirement covers 4 pillars of electrification that will enable development of key electrification parameters, which we'll cover later. Bottom line, TAC-V will allow developers across the force to electrify desired systems as we aggressively move towards electrification of the Army's ground fleet. Essential to our initiatives moving forward with industry and development of vehicle-based electrification initiatives and technology is just that, partnering with industry. This starts with maintaining situational awareness of ongoing and future efforts and leads to one of the reasons we're here today. We understand electrification will follow a natural progression. This progression will be driven by technological advancement in the areas of electric powertrain, increased onboard and mobile power generation, advancements in battery technology, sustainment capabilities, audible and thermal management, and formation power. As we advance, we will follow a build, test, learn, and adjust framework. This will help us chart our pathway towards an all-electric fleet while maintaining flexibility. We also need to be very sensitive, again, of incorporating sufficient power margins to accommodate growth for planned and unplanned future technology insertions. Again, since the Army can't go out and design a new vehicle every 5 to 10 years, we need to make sure that in each vehicle chassis, we're incorporating enough size, weight, and power to handle the inevitable increase of power demands of the future. We believe our plan is flexible, adaptive, and in a sense, we understand we will have to course correct to achieve our desirements and perhaps even change our end state as disruptive and new technologies come online. But at the end of the day, we're moving forward with all electric vehicles, and how we get there, we'll inform that as we go. Next slide, please. This slide charts our path to electrification, listing capabilities with the associated time frame at the bottom of the slide. Key to our goal of an all-electric brigade combat team is the ability to keep pace with industry and solve overarching power and battery challenges, mainly focused around sustainment capabilities. The big ones here, the questions is how do we generate and transport the amount of power required to sustain vehicles in an austere environment? How do we recharge in an austere environment? And how do we solve battery density issues that limit our ability to store enough energy to power heavy armored vehicles? Like mentioned earlier, we believe electrification under TAC-V will follow a natural progression driven by those technological advancements. For an open forum and a macro view, our objectives are broken down in the slide as the now, next, and eventually timeframes. We understand achieving all electric sustainment solutions is a far-term goal. We believe that the most feasible path to platform electrification is through the light vehicle fleet, more specifically through hybrid technology. However, as we move forward, the community is still interested in all electric vehicles now, if and when sustainment solutions are achievable and will allow us to meet our current mission requirements. As technologies advance in the midterm and support better battery density, rapid recharging, power management, and potentially lighter materials, we'll see modifications and new starts of the medium vehicle fleet or vehicles that support up to 10 tons of payload. Many of these vehicles fall in the support and service support categories. We also believe it's possible to hybridize heavy combat vehicles dependent on the results of some science and technology initiatives that are currently ongoing in the midterm. During the next time frame, we believe we'll start seeing a mixture of hybrid and all-electric vehicles, which will create a sustainment challenge that underlines the importance of developing that all-electric solution. Also during the midterm, it is essential we plan for enough size, weight, and power again, and cooling in the platforms to allow for modifications of hybrid systems to all-electric. Power availability to support and recharge high-demand energy systems such as directed energy weapons, vehicle protection systems, communications, and dismounted systems will require that in this time frame. Bottom line, right now we're focused on the now, and we're plotting a course to the next. And this is where we need your assistance. Capabilities we seek now are liquid fuel reduction, silent mobility, silent watch, exportable power, reduced thermal signature, increased reliance, and maintainability. Eventually, during the far term, we seek modification of the hybrid vehicles to all electric vehicles and new starts of vehicles of all sizes being built all electric. And like I said before, course correction along the way is key, as we know disruptive and new technologies will move out and industry will move in different directions. Next slide, please. Here you see what we're calling the 4 pillars of tactical and combat vehicle electrification. All of our desired electrification capabilities stem from power generation, power storage, power distribution, and power management. Starting with power generation. Power generation through propulsion is sought to sufficiently power future modifications and platforms through hybrid or all-electric drives at a rate that's associated as the best we can do in that associated time frame. Power generation covers onboard generation through range extenders, regenerative braking, or any other future technology, as well as sustainment power generation in the field to support the associated platforms. All TAC-V capabilities should be fielded with sustainment solutions that are common across the force and are adaptable to advancements in capability. We are currently excited to be working with the Ground Vehicle Systems Center, Program Executive Office, Combat Support Systems, Combat Support, Combat Service Support, and the sustainment seated to better define sustainment solutions. Power storage. Power storage must allow systems and sustainment solutions to store power to the maximum extent possible based on the associated timeframes. Like mentioned a few times before, essential to this system development is the size, weight, and power to facilitate that modularity we're seeking. This is essential to meet the tactical operation benefits, as well as affordability and system relevancy throughout the system's life cycle. Next is power distribution. Power distribution focuses on sustainment infrastructure to support hybrid and all-electric vehicles. Sustaining hybrid capabilities can be done under the current sustainment infrastructure minus recharging capabilities to top off the hybrid battery. All-electric capabilities will likely require a redesign of the sustainment system over time, giving the force more efficient capabilities. Achieving all-electric sustainment will reduce commander's logistical tail and increase duration for our units, facilitating better tempo on the battlefield. We believe hybrid and all-electric vehicles will require power distribution capabilities in garrison and field environments using common components to ensure that, when we move forward with microgridding and stuff like that, we're talking to the systems. Power distribution also supports exportable power, and power sharing supports those formation power needs. Again, we need industry's help to map out these complex challenges. The final pillar is power management. Developing power management capabilities will allow our soldiers to manage, control, distribute, and export vehicle and unit power. We intend that this is to assist through smart power, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. When we speak of power management, it's a balance of mobility, onboard application, and exportable power for missions. An example of what we're trying to achieve in terms of power management is how do we plan to move silent mobility to a hide position somewhere on a screen line, and then overwatch the enemy through silent watch and maintain enough power to move out of that same location under silent mobility and back to the assembly area. These power tools need to be able to allow commanders and vehicle commanders to achieve those capabilities and properly plan a mission, maximizing the use of these electric vehicles. At this point, I believe we've covered what we need to on TAC-V, and we'll be prepared to answer any questions on this at the end. Moving on to the electric light reconnaissance vehicle. Next slide, please. So the electric light reconnaissance vehicle. Earlier this year, our organization was directed to continue work on the light reconnaissance vehicle, and we were given specific instructions to make it electric. ELRV will be the first electric vehicle in the Army fleet. ELRV is projected to follow middle tier acquisitions rapid prototyping pathway, which allows the Army to develop this capability within a five years from the start. ELRV is a highly desired capability that will give our scouts the ability to better conduct simultaneous mounted and dismounted operations by seating 6 scouts per vehicle. MCDIT has been working closely with Joint Product Office, Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, and Product Lead Ground Mobility Vehicle to refine our requirements and develop a pathway towards vehicle realization. Product Lead GMV is currently developing a market survey intended to be released early in November, which Mr. Steve Herrick will discuss momentarily. It is important to note that ELRV has been recognized in funding discussions, and stakeholders intend to fund this program. Next slide, please. A hard requirement for ELRV is a 6-seat reconnaissance vehicle. The vehicle is intended to support the infantry brigade combat teams, and key to this requirement is maintaining that capacity. ELRV is the perfect electrification candidate vehicle, as all the benefits of platform electrification align perfectly with the Scout's mission. Scouting requires minimal signature, which electrification provides through silent watch, on-demand silent mobility, and extended duration. As mentioned before, we believe the most achievable path in incorporating electrification to this platform is through hybrid technology. However, we're on board with all electric capabilities if the vehicles come with a sustainment solution that can be supported in the deployed and field environments. Again, I want to highlight the ELRV requirements document has been written, submitted for Army staffing, has senior leader support, and has been included in Army funding discussions. Next slide, please. Moving on to the desired capabilities of ELRV. We've talked capacity, and we've also talked the propulsion requirements for this vehicle. Moving on to mobility. Mobility requirements follow standards with most other vehicles within the Army profile. However, we see this vehicle more along the lines of mobility in concert with the infantry squad vehicle. We know that the use of electric motors will provide the platform increased dash speed through high torque and in turn increased mobility. We also discussed the absolute importance that this vehicle has to have or requires on-demand silent mobility to support its reconnaissance mission. This is a big signature management reduction from the current fleet. Another big capability is that ELRV through electrification increases sustainability within the IBCT. Through electrification, we seek better reliability and maintainability through simplistic design of electric drivetrains and range extenders. Increased reliability will reduce the need to recover vehicles in the field and increase the operational readiness rates while providing reductions in spare parts. Duration is another critical component of the electrified ELRV. Like mentioned under TACV discussions, we understand duration will require balance between silent watch, silent mobility times, and formation power requirements. This drives the need for that mission planning tool that we discussed earlier, or onboard power management tools. ELRV will require recharging capabilities that allow it to recharge in both garrison and austere environments, whether it's topping off a battery of hybrid electric vehicles or it's recharging an all-electric battery system. ELRV also should include the ability to charge off host nation shore power. Next slide, please. Moving on to power storage. We seek a vehicle that can store energy to the maximum extent practical. The capability should include enough energy to power our requirements in terms of silent mobility, silent watch, and silent duration, and achieve that triad as we're able to complete missions. Regardless if it's hybrid electric or all electric, the capability should include enough room built into the design to allow for modularity and the ability to transition the vehicle to all electric capabilities later in its life cycle. This will enable longevity and relevancy of the platform as we adapt to higher energy demands in the future. Next is formation power. Again, we define formation power's ability to recharge all organic and habitually attached equipment that the soldiers will bring with them on the mission. Whether that is dismounted communications gear or equipment assigned to the 6 occupants, we desire the ability to recharge from the platform and have the tools to manage the available power to do that. Other key takeaways from this slide is that we seek the initial prototypes to be able to support weapon systems up to a M250 cal and Mark 19 with the ability to accept a common remotely operated weapon system. The curb weight we seek should not exceed 8,000 pounds and will have the ability to support 4,000 pounds of mission payload. I mentioned development of this system looks to follow the rapid prototyping. In the prototyping phase of development, our priorities are the 6-person vehicle capacity, electric powertrain, and the transportability to be sling loadable by CH-47 and conduct forcible entry operations. As the system moves through rapid prototyping, we'll look at the trades and work with the PM to prioritize. Next slide, please. All right, this concludes my ELRV discussion. I'd like to now introduce the product lead for Product Lead Ground Mobility Systems, Mr. Steve Herrick. He'll be discussing their upcoming market survey. Steve, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Major Wrestler. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate the time this afternoon to discuss this emerging requirement. Bottom line is we find ourselves at a flexion point where finally the Army is meeting up with the same demand and the same desires that industry is currently pursuing. So when you look at the forecast of your heavy duty trucks vice our light tactical vehicles, we find the industry and the commercial market really going after the electrical powered and alternative propulsion systems. So it's a perfect storm that we see as the Army to introduce a great acquisition program moving forward. With that being said, we have to take a phased approach to refine the requirement and the development. Although we are moving quickly and have the desire to move quickly, we must make sure our decisions are informed by industry and the realm of capability is possible in the timeline. So as stated, we must not rush to our requirement. We will take a metered approach. This initial market survey that we're targeting in early November is going to shape the future acquisition program in totality and the requirements moving forward. So our industry engagement is going to be early and often. This is just the first of many engagements we plan on having as a joint community between the acquisition community, the requirements, and Army Futures Command, as well as the sustainment directorates, to make sure we get this right. As Major Ressler identified, the requirements document is in worldwide staffing. There's not a solicitation at this time because we require you to inform that solicitation on what we need to ask for, and we're asking for the right things. We do intend to enter at a pre-milestone B or C dependent on the path forward and the responses we receive from you to shape the middle tier acquisition program. And that is important to note, is if we don't get the correct information and move forward with an industry informed position, you may not be able to play or place yourself in a position to not inform this requirement moving forward. So we already know that there are some shortfalls. We recognize that we haven't operated in this arena as much as the development process you've been doing moving forward. So we want the candid and honest feedback in what you've already learned in the off-road alternative propulsion system arena requiring possible larger payloads. We realize that a lot of the vehicle systems commercially are designed for EPA highway. And as Major Ressler highlighted, our operation is potentially 70% off-road activities. So we know that there is an impact to your battery loads as well as the propulsion systems are required for the ELRV concept. We recognize that this is a highly competitive future market for commercial trucks. So we will handle your data appropriately as long as you are marking it proprietary and marking everything you need to when you respond to the market survey, that we cannot release this without any issues to your industry or your industry partners. We will follow the Trade Secrets Act to make sure we protect your confidential information and only engage on the topics with you where necessary. So we are targeting, highlight on the chart, end of the month release. That is aggressive, but worst case scenario, early November for the market survey. It is broken into 3 sections. It is the concept of commercially available to inform and influence the baseline requirement of what's in the realm of possible, as well as military integrated. So your non-developmental systems, or for those of you that have taken a commercial powertrain solution and modified COTS to a military solution. And then the biggest thing is the supportability and sustainment of a chassis. We can't develop a system in a vehicle without that tail end of understanding how to support it in the field and on garrison or in an austere environment. And just in closing, honest and candid feedback is critical to the success of this program. Within the market survey, you will see a draft acquisition strategy, as well as overarching questions for your input from cost, from concept, from areas that need to be refined that cause you issues across the desired capabilities. You will not hurt the Army's feelings with coming back to us with suggestions to make this program better. So honest and candid feedback is critical for this program, and I asked for your candor in response to this market survey. With that, Major Ressler, concludes my slide.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and we obviously look forward to working with you on this program moving forward. If we can move on to the slide 17 now, next slide. So the whole reason we're here today is to seek feedback, like Steve mentioned, and we want to inform our efforts and move forward with you, industry, as we advance our initiatives, especially TAC-V in terms of moving forward. In terms of follow-on briefs, please reach out to Mr. Steve Sokolsky from CalSTART to schedule one-on-one meetings with topics that you'd like to discuss, and we'll receive all those requests and respond accordingly. We're looking forward to scheduling this. We're looking at scheduling stuff between now and end of November, and we're interested in hearing specific initiatives that your companies have to help us inform our requirements, and more specifically help us with the ELRV, like Steve mentioned. Steve, do you have anything to add to this slide?
I think the biggest thing, and to reiterate, is if you do not respond and do not provide input, we can't help inform a better requirement moving forward for the soldiers, as well as industry involvement and transparency throughout this process. So the biggest way you can help is by responding to the market survey as requested, and engage early and often in a push and pull relationship with the U.S. government, the Army, and industry partners in accordance with the one-on-one sessions and any future industry days we have.
And I think that's a very important comment, and just elaborate on that. So there's two initiatives. There's ELRV with the market survey, and then there's TAC-V. So TAC-V is an enduring requirement. And as we move forward in electrifying of the ground fleet outside of just ELRV, there's going to be other systems out there, and we're looking to see what's out there, what industry you have that can help us inform our requirement and help us refine it for the soldiers in the field as we move forward. And that course correction along the way, so the near, mid, and far term objectives that we have for electrification, any guidance on that would be very beneficial as we align with industry. Okay, I'll open it up to James. James, did you have any final comments before we transition to question and answers? And please bring any questions on the bottom right hand of your screen. There's a question and answer area. I think we only got a couple that I can address here in a second. But if there's any questions, by all means, we have the time and we can address these questions. James, did you have any closing thoughts?
No other closing thoughts.
Okay. All right, Mike Smith here in the room with me. He's managing, kind of moderating questions and answers. Again, if you have any questions and answers, please come online. What do you have, Mike?
Yeah, so far I only have 4 questions. 3 of those questions have to do with how can they get a copy of the briefing slides. And I'm assuming that they'll get those through CalSTART.
Yeah, so right now, there should be a copy of the briefing slide. You go back to the registration registration page. There should be a copy of the briefing slides there. If not, when you reach out to Steve Sokolsky to coordinate one-on-one interviews with us, please request, and he'll automatically send the slides. There's going to be a point of contact slide at the end of this brief that we'll leave up after we're finished here for 20 or 30 minutes, and you can get all of our contact information down. And if you had any questions specifically for any one of us, by all means, shoot us an email or give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And I know from GVSC, I've added Dean McGrew to that as well. He's been a big help on our initiatives here, so he's on that as well.
Oh, and I also had a question: will Dr. Mencia's white paper be provided, please?
Yeah, so that's on there as well. So the white paper is also, when you go back to the registration page, you should be able to download that. And if you have any issues downloading that, please reach out to Steve Sokolsky. He should be able to get that to you. And if he can't, by all means, reach out to me, and I'll make sure that you have a copy of that.
Okay, and so far I have one more question, and that is, what other capabilities are being sought after in the ELRV abbreviated capabilities document in regards to swap trade-offs?
Okay, so yeah, we've taken a broad approach to describing our requirements document. And in terms of swap trade-offs, I think as we move forward, we can address that in one-on-one discussions, absolutely. My main concern in terms of, balancing power on the vehicle. But in terms of swap, yeah, I think that's something we can handle in one-on-one discussions and get in a little more in detail.
In Major Resler, if I may, within the market survey, I know it's probably hard to catch it, but Major Resler highlighted 3 critical desired requirements that you can almost envision as KPPs. With the remaining requirements in the market survey or desired capabilities, we're asking you, what more can you offer above and beyond those three requirements, and where does it become tough to meet those requirements? So within the market survey, we're going to ask for your feedback. If those three requirements are locked, what concerns does that bring to your possible vehicle solution? And that'll just help us keep informing the requirements before we go full show time. So once again, just ask for your feedback on those. Over.
Yeah, and thanks, Steve. Thanks for that follow-up. That was definitely helpful. Mike, any other questions?
Roger, yes. Another question was, are EV technologies used in these Army applications covered by ITAR?
I don't know, Steve. Can you answer that one?
Yes. For example, the infantry squad vehicle is a commercial product from the chassis down. There are ITAR components, and government contracts create ITAR environments. So yes.
Okay.
Okay. Are there more vehicle specifications available? For example, dimensional, electrical, 12 volt, 24 volt.
So I think that's a question we're asking industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, is we're looking at the now, and we're also looking at projecting in the future to higher demand energy, so I think that's a question that we have for industry. We don't want to limit it, and we'd like to open that up, and that's part of why we're doing this today and why we want candid feedback. What would apply better moving forward? Steve, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, just to add to that, the biggest thing is you generate your desired capabilities, your KPPs, KSAs throughout the requirements document. The PM shop in concert with the user community creates those trickle-down P-spec requirements that create the total requirements base for the vehicle. So you'll see within the market survey that we ask some of those leading questions that tie to those desired capabilities of, for example, in the question is 12 volt, 24 volt, up to 48 volt. And those are those tradable things that we need to know and realize that we don't box ourselves as the Army into a position, nor do we box industry into a position that's unobtainable. So in the market survey, you'll see the leading questions that will help shape and create those trickle down requirement sets.
Yeah, and I think in terms of TAC-V outside of ELRV, we want to see modularity. We want to see adaptability. If new systems and future capabilities are going to require higher demand voltage or whatever it is, how do we achieve that as we move forward? So just another thing from our perspective. Okay.
Next question is, what is the desired timeline to move first electrification into manufacturing and field deployment for the Army?
So I know from a requirements perspective, I'll turn that one over to you, Steve. I can answer. We were looking for a capability by, FY25 for the warfighter is kind of our goal, seeing a light reconnaissance capability or a first electrified capability. And it's following that rapid prototyping pathway, I believe. I'll open it up. Steve, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that the competitive environment as well, prototyping and starting real life hardware solutions for the Army to evaluate as early as 22, but no later than 23 to start to meet that 25 requirement that the user requires. And
okay.
we also have that captured within the market survey.
Okay. And we're getting more questions in just to keep everyone in the loop here, what's going on. All right, Mike, next question.
Sure. The next is, are you looking at ELRV as a new vehicle or a new powertrain for Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, formerly designated as an interim LRV?
So this would be a new vehicle. This would definitely be a new vehicle, it was a question, an interim vehicle or using, yeah, this would definitely be a new capability, a new vehicle, electric light reconnaissance vehicle.
And not part of the JLTV.
And not part of the JLTV. Okay.
All right, next question. Do you plan any near-term initiatives to add electrification export power, etc., to the heavy truck fleet? Or will the emphasis be on the light fleet initially?
So, and that's a discussion as we're forming a community interest, and we have formed a community interest. And as we move forward with that, we're developing a strategy on how we want to electrify the tactical and combat vehicle fleet. The opportunities, we're gonna be balancing a few things: a warfighter need, available technology to support, different size platforms. Obviously, as we look across, strategy on funding to support, and then return on investment. So I think it depends. If we find a vehicle out there that has the ability to give us good return on investment, the warfighter needs it, and it's providing a capability, and then we prioritized it in the TAC-V 1 to N list, then yeah, we'd go after a heavy vehicle. If there's that capability out there, we want to, and that's part of this whole discussion here, or this, these follow-up meetings, is what's in the realm of possible as we move forward. We've got some ideas on potentially early on vehicles that could be electrified, and we've got ideas on what we'd like to see electrified. But once we start moving past the light vehicle chassis into medium and heavy vehicles, then we run up against some technology gaps there. So I guess bottom line is that's why we want to have these follow-up discussions. We want to better be able to, for TAC-V, be able to set a course on prioritization of what we electrify based on what's achievable, and then we take it back and figure out to balance that with warfighter need. Anyone else on the line have any comment on that? Okay.
Next question is, how does the military envision charging electric vehicles in theater, using generator sets?
And I would say again, that's why we're here. So, there's all kinds of ideas out there. I know GVSC has started thinking through this, and PEO, CS, CSS, they're starting to establish with us working groups on how we look at sustainment solutions, and the sustainment seated has been big player in this and helping us develop these requirements as well. So that's what we're looking at. What's in the realm of possible when we talk recharging capabilities? Is it off generators in the field? Do we develop a new capability? Way down in the future, is there some kind of other power generation technique that can generate massive amounts of power in the field? And then once we get to getting to the local units, how do we quickly recharge these capabilities? Is it swapping battery packs? Is it having some kind of truck with a giant battery that can do quick recharge? We know that we're going to need, for all electric vehicles, we will need a garrison capability and a capability for the austere environment. But that's why we want to have some of these discussions. This is important to us, figuring this out. We feel we got some time up front if we can't necessarily get to an all electric vehicle for early on. But once we get in this mid time frame, or even exiting the early time frame, we're going to really have to start getting some answers and building a direction on this. I hope that answered the question. And if anyone else on the line has any thoughts on that, Steve or James.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is informing the sustainment piece is critical. So how you support current solutions you're doing in the commercial sector, recharge stations, at malls, or how are those adaptable to the Army, as well as there's multiple commercial entities that are participating in off-road races right now with electric SUVs or trucks. How was that sustained throughout the race? Whether it's 2 kilometers, what was the process that you did to keep that vehicle running? So we just asked for that feedback in a possibly proprietary manner in those one-on-one sessions.
And this turns into looking at some of the other challenges too with heavier vehicles. So if we get heavy vehicles that can support all electric someday, how do you get power out to them in large quantities? I think it's open-ended, and I think we need to come together with industry, like Steve said, and figure that out.
This is James. Mancias, just quickly, I think that's actually a very valid question when we think about vehicles or electrified vehicles. It's really not just electrified vehicles. It's a system of systems, and certainly the integration of the infrastructure in collaboration or in concert with electrified vehicle is sort of what creates an electrified vehicle solution set. And so I don't know if we have an answer for that yet. Whether it's some sort of organic power generation reliant on JP8, power harvesting using renewable energy, local grids, or the like. But certainly there is that interface between us and whatever the power generation is going to be. And so creating a infrastructure or supporting infrastructure that meets mobility requirements for the Army is a key requirement for electrified vehicles. And understanding that interface and what it is something we're not quite sure about yet, but it is definitely part of this discussion. And so I think follow-up discussion is certainly warranted.
Yep. Yeah, and like Steve mentioned, it's achievable in the civilian sector, but how do we take that technology and put it out in an austere environment? That's the gap there. Okay. All right, Mike.
Yes. Next question was, please address thoughts on a JLTV follow-on contract technical insertion.
Steve, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's not the arena for this question.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, next question.
Okay.
All right, give us 1 minute. He's going through them.
Okay, is there a draft ELRV requirements or capabilities brief available for industry? And I think that that's going to come with and after the market survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's something we put out after the market surveys. Steve, anything on that?
Yeah, I think these charts, when they're published, are a good jump off point. The market survey gets in a little bit more detail, defining some of the desires. So yeah, forthcoming.
Okay. Next question.
The primary benefit of hybrid systems results from regenerative braking. Does the Army expect to have sufficient regenerative braking in the mission profile?
Yeah, so I think that's part of helping us inform our requirements and competing for these requirements. Is we're not necessarily, from a requirements perspective, we're not telling you how to do it at all. We just require, we have our propulsion ideas, solutions that we'd like to see incorporated, and we have our requirements in terms of the requirements document. Those have been transitioned over to Steve once this gets approved, and Steve will take that and move forward with it. But if that's a means to get there, by all means, regenerative braking. Steve, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. We don't know. Well, we don't know. So having your assets over a militarized mission profile may inform that that's not possible. So that's the iterative process that this program will take to continuously inform their requirements.
Yeah, and in terms of the requirements, there's a lot of, to the greatest extent possible in there. So, we understand these are new technologies, and as we go through prototyping, producing power to the greatest extent possible. We want to see what you can do as industry to help us achieve these requirements. And we've seen hybrid vehicles. I have a hybrid vehicle, and we've seen all electric vehicles. We know what's out there, but what can you take to satisfy our requirements to the greatest extent practical, and help us get after, the things we discussed today?
Another question was gross vehicle weight plus the payload weight would end up with a gross vehicle weight of 12,000 pounds, correct, which is correct.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Steve, anything on payload?
Yeah, I was getting feedback there, but I believe the question was vehicle curb weight plus the payload equals the GVW.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got a couple more questions.
Is there trade space for armor/survivability?
So the main things we're looking for right now is capacity, propulsion, type of propulsion system, and the mobility, transportability, that type of stuff right now. Once we move on past the prototyping phase, that's when we're looking for, to conduct some of these trades and looking at different armored solutions. Steve, anything on that?
No, got covered.
Okay.
So I guess when I ask the question, yeah. Okay.
So just maybe elaborate on that question a little bit. Right now, we have an abbreviated capabilities development document, and that's projecting us down the path of rapid prototyping. Later on, we would refine those requirements into the, once this is informed better, and then those will come back up, and we'll look at trades at that point. This is a light reconnaissance vehicle, and we're looking to keep it light and transportable.
Yeah, I think to scope it too, right, is that to the greatest extent possible, as you referred to it, is this industry involvement and market survey and phased approach will help us bound those threshold and objectives that industry is looking for. So that's why it's critical. Is it may scare you the desired and the greatest extent possible, but in turn, that helps us frame those future threshold and objective requirements.
Yeah, and what we put out in terms of an ACDD is we have desirements. We don't necessarily have those threshold and objectives in there. So we have our desirements, and then we're informing those through those prototyping. Yep.
I believe this next.
Could you hear that, Steve?
No,
You're on mute. Like.
All right, we'll try it again. I believe this is for Mr. Harrigan. It's, do you expect to conduct this competition similar to ISV, OTA transitioning to FAR-based production contract? What is the U.S. Army's AAO for ELRV?
So we have a baseline acquisition strategy that looks similar to what the Army knows and is what's practicing as far as soldier touch points and transitioning technology in a rapid fashion. So we ask for your feedback in that market survey. As far as the AAO, I cannot comment on it, nor do I have that off the top of my head.
Next question, would you consider discussions with foreign companies which are experimenting with hybrid light tactical vehicles with TRL-9 recharge capabilities?
We'd have to get back with that question.
Yeah, I would say that's a good question and definitely a follow-up interview.
Right.
And just so as a reminder, go through Steve Sokolsky for those follow-up interviews, and he will get with us and we will get those all scheduled.
Looks like I have two more questions. One was, who will issue the market survey?
That'll come from my office through sam.gov.
Okay, and the last question I have is, why not internally transportable as well as sling load?
So we discussed that, and right now it's transportable by CH-47. So, we're open to different solutions on a lot of these. Again, these are desirements, and as we move forward, industry will help Steve inform these better so that when we come and we can set threshold and objective requirements when we move into the capabilities development document. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, and I mean, I think essentially the biggest thing is size, right? So when you start combining 6 people in a vehicle with a weapon station on top, and that vehicle has to be ready to go from transport mode, does industry have a foldable weapon station that comes down to fit within that 70-inch parameters of internal CH-47? So that's kind of the feedback we're looking for, is what's in the realm of possible. So I mean, there are your limitations of size, weight, and when you get into the transportability requirements.
That's all I have.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'll do one last call for any more questions. We'll stand by for 30 seconds, and then we'll start wrapping it up. Any closing comments from the team here? James, Steve, anything else you want to add?
Just, please adhere to the market survey timelines. We know it's going to probably come at the best time possible for industry, right? During Thanksgiving and coming up on other holidays during the year. So we know, the government's good at that. So just please, honest, candid feedback, and look forward to scheduling some one-on-ones. The market survey also asks for that outside of the CalSTART arena. So you'll look at a larger government entity combined IPT that will be set up for those discussions. That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah, and I just want to take an opportunity to thank everybody for participating in this call, and we're really looking forward to these one-on-one interviews. I think we can discuss a lot and really get after what's in that realm of possible. Again, there's two initiatives here. You have ELRV and you have TAC-V. And one's an overarching enduring requirement, and one's a requirement coming up soon. So by all means, schedule those interviews with Mr. Steve Sokolsky. The slide for points of contact will be coming up shortly. And we look at doing these again in the future. I think this is going to be very beneficial for everybody involved. And I've enjoyed doing this, and I want to thank everyone that's participated in this. Thanks again for your participation. Other than that, I just want to thank everybody for dialing in for this, and we look forward to those interviews. And that's all I got. Have a great day.